Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another Reformatted Discography review, the bit where I'm going to be making new discography reviews for all the old ones I did in the new format, updating them with the albums that they've dropped since I've talked about them last, give you the rankings, all that sort of stuff, the stuff you guys have grown accustomed to with the new discography reviews. And this month on the docket is Green Day. I'm going to be ranking all 13 of their records and breaking down what I like and dislike about them, and giving you guys a sort of roadmap for those that are looking to get into the band if you haven't given them a chance already. If you'd like to see an extended cut of this intro where I talk a little bit more about my love of the band over the years versus my early years through my discography review to now, it's linked in the description. It's the Patreon cut. It's always longer than this one. The only difference is that this one usually has more talking about the Patreon cut. But let's go ahead and start breaking down these records by starting with their EPs. Now, Sweet Children, Slappy, and 1,000 Hours were all lumped into a collection with their debut album anyway, 39 Smooth, and they're good enough songs if you want to hear the band cut their teeth with a little more of an edgier sound, a la similar to what The Offspring was doing on their earlier releases to kind of put it into sort of a newer discography review comparison. It's very similar. You know, the playing is a lot rawer. The drums aren't quite as full-centric and zany as Trey Cool's because it's got John Cliffmeyer on drums, and he's a competent enough punk drummer. He's got the energy, he's got the punchiness to his playing that I do enjoy, and there's some good stuff here, and there's some good hook work on here as well throughout a handful of these cuts. If you want to hear Green Day cut their teeth, maybe listen to this in companion with 39 Smooth if you're wanting to hear an old school punk sound, but I wouldn't necessarily start with these. They're just a good offshoot if you enjoy 39 Smooth and you want to hear just a little more of that sound, you know, a little more raw Green Day at their rawest. And honestly, all the songs on Sweet Children ended up on Kerplunk, so that's why I didn't put it in this section. This is a good place to go. If honestly, one day I might do a redacted where I inject some of the songs from here that I think are better than some of the songs on 39 Smooth, because there's some, and make a proverbial better 39 Smooth. But that's not for, wouldn't be for till later times, because I've got so much other shit to do. But let's go ahead and talk about these fucking records, shall we, with the most obvious pick. You guys know I don't like this record. I didn't like it when it came out. I still think it's arguably Green Day's worst project. While it's not a sound that they haven't explored before on the likes of Dose and Foxborough Hot Tubs, this just feels like a lazier product. In that being said, Dose had some lazy, cringy moments. This is just the most lazy. The worst produced. I hate the production on this record. It's obnoxious. I liken this to Eminem's Revival. It's a very dad-sounding record in the worst way possible. Green Day's age has never really shown in their music. Even in some of their other later career stuff, their record before this is much higher on the list than this would be for a follow-up. This is such a stark drop in quality. It's baffling. I can't express enough how disappointing this record is as a fan of Green Day, even following a tenure or a decade of really tumultuous output from the band. This is still hands down their worst release. The first time I've done a reformatted or discography review in general where you don't have to cherry pick shit. Even the title track or tracks like Junkies on High or Sugar Youth just aren't needed. You don't need to put yourself through them to find something of quality. You can get better this type of Green Day from other releases they've done that I've already mentioned in this section. It's not worth your time. Don't worry about it. Just leave it in the past where it belongs.
I fell in love, but it did.
Now, I am giving each slice of the trilogy their own spot, even though they are the next three records in this ranking, because I have different things to say about each one. I reviewed them on the channel years ago by themselves, so I'm going to keep that here. And I still think Trey is arguably the most boring of the trilogy. You know, John's redacted of it that he did made me appreciate some of the songs on here, but I still think it is by and large the weakest of the three. The playing is the laziest. It's a lot more tepid than I would want from a Green Day project. And I'll have that complaint about a couple of the records from this era, not just the trilogy. I think that they could have done with more to beef up. There's still songs that I like on here. You know, it's not like the last record where there's nothing of redeeming quality, in my opinion. There's at least something that you can pull from as a fan if you like certain aspects of Green Day's sound. You know, I get that they're going for this huge in scope, and it comes across on a couple of tracks like the opener, Brutal Love. I just feel like a lot of these songs go on for way too long. I know people have asked me to do a redacted on this trilogy since I've started doing this segment, and the only reason why I've reserved doing a redacted on it is because John did one, and I don't necessarily think that you need two redacteds out there of the same prospect, but I will say I do like a handful of cuts on here, like X-Kid. I think X-Kid's a solid track. Of course, 99 Revolutions and Dirty Rotten Bastards has them channeling epicness in the way that this album needed. This album needed more tracks like that. You know, if they wanted to go epic, I felt like needed to tap more into the operatic years. You know, they did a whole decade pretty much of just perfecting the rock opera. Why not try to harness that in a different facet on Trey? I don't know why they didn't do that, and they just went with gaudy production and mid-tempo blandness. This record had potential. I just feel like it was bogged down by a lot of the band's ideas they were aiming for at the time, and I feel like if you're gonna listen to Trey, cherry pick it like you do any of the trilogy, which, speaking of more of the trilogy,
You always seem to be stepping in shit, and all you really do is complain.
while I think Uno suffers the same tragedy as a lot of mid-tempo slog that Trey has, what I feel like sets it above Trey are the more pop-centric leaning tunes that was the whole focus of Uno. You know, it's not like a bunch of mid-tempo slog with tacky wallpaper. It's at least got some cut the bullshit pacing that makes it a better listening experience as a whole. I love the opener Nuclear Family. I love the faster cuts or more energetic cuts like Let Yourself Go or Troublemaker. You know, I think this record has more shinier moments than Trey. It has some moments that are on par with some of the worst of the trilogy, like Kill the DJ. I fucking hate that song. I think it's really, really bad. And I don't like the closer, Oh Love. I think it's a really boring note to end this record out on. But there's at least more redeemable qualities on Uno than on Trey, in my opinion. I feel like if I were to make a redacted, I would include more Uno than Trey. But maybe that's just me. So apparently I'm in a weird spot for liking Dose more than Uno and Trey. But I do. While I get it, I know this record's lows are more abundant and on par with some of the worst stuff on Father of All, like Fuck Time and Lady Cobra and Nightlife. Those are probably three of the worst songs from the trilogy. Not gonna refute that. But I think the utilization of garage rock aesthetics is better than the pop rock and epic aesthetics used in the trilogy. I just think it sounds better when it's done right. You know, tracks like Straight Heart, Lazy Bones, Stop When the Red Lights Flash, Wow That's Loud, or even the more subdued moments like the closer Amy. It's just a more consistent experience across the board, or at least more tonally interesting record than the other two. Its lows are pretty bad, but its highs, I'd argue, are higher than the highs on Uno and Trey. It's a weird barometer. It's a roller coaster ride that I think helps it meet above the other two, even if its lows dip far under. If I were to do a redacted, I'd take those songs the fuck out of here, 'cause they suck. But again, I don't plan on doing a redacted on the trilogy unless John's okay with it and you guys want it that badly. This may be considered a hot take. I don't know where the general consensus of Green Day fans sits with 21st Century Breakdown. I know some that love it. I know some that don't. I lean on the side of those that don't. I think that this record tries too hard to recapture the magic of American Idiot, and I think a lot of the issues Crash had with the narrative of this record and how derivative it felt from American Idiot are a lot of my issues with the lyrics on this record. I do think this record has some good songs on it as a whole, but I feel like its lows are down there with some of the more mid-tempo moments from the trilogy. You know, I like the title track of this record. I think Christian's Inferno is a song that has grown on me. I know I didn't like it when I first reviewed it, but it's a song that's grown on me. I think that Last Night on Earth is a great closer to the first act that then bleeds into East Jesus Nowhere and Peacemaker very well. I love that run of tracks on this. I think that Horseshoes and Hand Grenades is a good opener to the third act, but I think that this is sort of similar to when an independent filmmaker then gets a budget to make a bigger movie. In fact, a great comparison would be Michael Mann. When Michael Mann made Heat, and then he remade it with Val Kilmer, Robert De Niro, and Al Pacino, only while that version of Heat is basically perfect, the equivalent of that 21st Century Breakdown isn't nearly as good as American Idiot. The more, I don't want to say independent version, but the less gaudy version of it. I feel like they lean more on additional accompaniment and operatic elements to make the story seem bigger, while there's other instrumentation on American Idiot. I feel like it's used tastefully. On here, it just doesn't work the same way. You know, the strings and swells that come on Restless Heart Syndrome, or the the definite accompaniment on Viva La Gloria to help enhance that song sonically, don't necessarily do anything other than just add more accompaniment. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, I just feel like it feels like a crutch that this album is leaning on to sort of invoke you in the atmosphere, whereas American Idiot didn't need that. It just used lyrics and theming written-wise to get you roped into it. So, I don't know. And plus, I hate the singles from this era. I hate Know Your Enemy. I hate 21 Guns. They are some of my least favorite Green Day songs personally. I think they're obnoxious and too basic for a band with this level of talent in its roster. But yeah, this record sort of meets in the middle with me because its highs are pretty good, but its lows are pretty bad. And it's just one of the more derivative aspects of Green Day's career in a way that I feel like is a little too derivative for me personally. While I like the production of it better than What's Next, I think it's a little too bloated and weighty for to be anything better than just alright. And I want to make it last, I was there. Similarly to the Offspring discography review, just because this record is at this point in the list does not mean it is a bad listening experience. This is a pretty solid record. If you want to hear Green Day cutting their teeth, this is a decent place to start. If you like that sort of raw, energetic 80s style punk and you want to hear a band like Green Day tap into that sound, if that sounds like it'll cut your jib, you should start with this project, honestly. It's got some decent cuts on it. I actually really like I Was There. I think the hook on that is fantastic, and I think that this is some of the best drumming that they got from their original drummer, John Cliffmeyer. I think that Going to Pascal was another really good song. I think that the opener At the Library is fucking tight, a tight, edgy punk song that just has some good sounds to it. While it's not necessarily peak Green Day performance-wise, because I feel like they really reached their chemistry apex once they kind of settled in with Trey, this is a nice, humble beginnings. Again, if you like the sort of sounds that were in 80s, early 90s punk, and you want to hear Green Day throw that style into their repertoire, this is a decent place to go. I wouldn't necessarily start with that unless you really like old school punk, because I feel like their later material is better, but this is solid enough as it is. It could even be a good next step if you enjoy the heavier moments or the edgier moments on Insomniac and Dookie. Like, it's honestly really that good, in my opinion. With that said, Kerplunk is also something of a similar ilk. While I feel like the growing pains of Trey are felt more, the songs on here are just better than the songs on 39 Smooth. The hook writing is a lot better. You know, 2,000 Light Years Away, No One Knows, the melody on Who Wrote Holden Caulfield, fucking Welcome to Paradise has its genesis on this record. This is a sort of growing pains record. It's a transitional record at its core, but I feel like it's an essential piece of Green Day's discography because it's where they let Trey cut his teeth with the band. You know, his drumming is wild at points. It's very gnashing, and it's all over the map at points, but it's Trey Cool being Trey Cool, and I really enjoy that. I think that if you like Dookie, and you want to hear an edgier Dookie, or you want to hear some of Dookie's ideas in a nice Genesis, listen to Kerplunk, and then maybe go to 39 Smooth. Or after 39 Smooth, come to Kerplunk. These are two kind of companion records, because they're both produced in a similar way. They both have that kind of early 90s edgy punk sound to it that I honestly have a nice ear for. I love that sound. I love when guitars sound that kind of gritty. I love when the drums have that kind of tinny punch to them. You know, it's not completely without its low end, but it's a lot edgier, and I like that sound a lot. I think it sounds really neat. I don't think it's the best produced thing, but personally, it hits my ear pretty well. Again, not necessarily the best writing across the board, but it's still a step up. This is when the writing is getting more consistent, and the songs are sounding a lot better.
'Cause I'm still breathing. 'Cause I'm
Again, I don't know how much of a take this is to put it above Kerplunk and 21st Century Breakdown, but I think Revolution Radio is the proper send-off to the American Idiot era of Green Day. I think this record is honestly very, very solid. It's very good. I feel like if you like American Idiot and you want a better companion piece to it than 21st Century Breakdown, go to Revolution Radio. While I think it takes a little bit of time for it to pick itself back up after the first three songs, once it picks itself back up again, it kind of keeps it throttled until the end. You know, I like Somewhere Now, I like the opener, I like the harmonies in it really well. I think it goes on for maybe a little too long, but that's kind of the era of this era of Green Day. They just didn't know when to hit stop on the recorder. But I think that Bang Bang and Revolution Radio are incredible singles. I think that they are so very punchy. They're a Green Day that I feel like we were needing after the Trilogy, and I feel like they welcomed themselves back in good graces, in good fashion. I love the chorus of Bang Bang. I'm getting chills just talking about it. I think that is some razor sharp Green Day in the best way possible. I fucking adore that track. And the chorus of Revolution Radio is hooky in all of the right ways. Like I said, I feel like it takes a little bit of a nosedive. I think Say Goodbye, Outlaws, and Outlaws are two of the weaker tracks on the record, but they aren't without their good moments. I just feel like they are songs that, like the opener, just need a little bit of a trim. I feel like Bouncing Off the Wall would honestly be done better if played faster. They kind of run into this error that they were running into throughout the Trilogy, where songs were just too slow. They needed to just pick it up a little bit. And on a record where they were introducing energy back in a big way, it would have been nice to see him do it on some songs that maybe just needed a little bit of a tempo change. But other singles on here, Still Breathing, another amazing single that has a killer fucking chorus. I think Youngblood is a little bit, it's treading on those territories that the Trilogy reach with some of its worser hook writing. You know, I feel like it's on par with Dose and Uno with some of the subpar chorus work. But by and large, this record is a lot more consistent than 21st Century Breakdown and the Trilogy to me personally. And I feel like this was a ray of sunshine in a decade of underwhelming releases from a band that I hold so very dear. I feel like I said, this is a great next place to go. If you like the sharp writing and punchiness that was on American Idiot and you want a good place to go after it, I personally would not recommend 21st Century Breakdown. I would recommend Revolution Radio. I think my one-sentence review for it on the listening log, because this was on a listening log just before I started doing the video reviews, I said that this is the warning of the American Idiot era, and I still feel that, and I'll go more into why when I talk about warning, but I feel like a lot of the ideas on here just hit me in the same way that listening to Warning does, if that makes any sense. It feels like the end of an era. It feels like a shift in soul is taking place, and it's sort of passing the torch off creatively to something else. So I know that there's people on the internet that really love this record, and I also really enjoy this record. I personally think the records above this are a tighter listening experience, but I don't think the sonic vignettes are for naught on Nimrod. That's actually one of the aspects I adore about this record. I think that King for a Day's ska infusion is awesome. Y'all know I love some ska. I love Last Ride-In's laid-back nature, and I love the outright just ferocity in a lot of the guitar work on here. I mean, fucking How Shinka, fucking Platypus, I Hate You, and Scattered feel like these more raw elements that were on parts of Insomniac and Dookie, but step forward just a little more. I love Good Riddance. I think it's a great, understated ballad that I feel like holds up incredibly well. I love the catchier moments like Hitchin' a Ride, and I love the sort of typical, as of this point, Green Day tracks like Nice Guys Finish Last and Hitchin' a Ride, even though they also have their own different sonic vignettes in them. I like that this record was all about experimentation. I just feel like it's a little bloated, just a smidgen bloated, just a smidgen. I think that it could be tightened up maybe a little bit. Just a couple of chops out of there. Not necessarily redacted territory, more microdacted territory. It's a very solid release that I don't think anybody needs to shit on, because I'll go to bat for this record at the end of the day. I think that if you like Dookie and you like Insomniac and you want something a little punkier that's also a little weirder, or if you like Warning and you maybe didn't listen to Nimrod, listen to Nimrod. It's got a lot of cool ideas in it. It's just a weird offshoot in Green Day's sound that I think they captured pretty fucking well, and they made it a pretty tight experience, all things considered. I just think it's just a little much. Just a smidge. Don't hate me for saying that. It's just a smidgen. Just a tiny schmeckle. Just a schmeckle too much at times. Now, like I said a couple parts ago, I feel like this was the last glimpse of this era of Green Day. This sort of slacker, laid-back mentality that coded a lot of the tracks from the last three records. Sort of reached an apex here, especially with the title track. The writing on that song has that same style, but it's presenting a different type of message. And I feel like Revolution Radio is sort of playing up some of the ideas from the American Idiot era and also spinning some different stuff around. And I don't have any problems with that. And that's honestly why I like Warning a fuck ton. I mean, hell, Blood, Sex, and Booze feels like a better swing song than stuff like Hitchin' a Ride was on Nimrod. It feels like an expansion of that in a better way on here. I like the injections of acoustic accompaniment into the punkier aspects of this record. I love the title track. I love the bass line on that song. I love the just infusion of, again, that melding of worlds into transitioning into writing more conscious stuff, because this record has a handful of stuff like that, like Church on Sunday and Fashion Victim and Minority. You know, it's a lot more blunt in what it has to say, and I appreciate that about it. I like that the track Misery has this weird sort of, I don't want to say gothic folk sound, but it's kind of there, you know. I enjoy the accompaniment on that song, and I love that it's this odd little sonic adventure that they take you on. I like that they're aiming for different types of rafters on this song. It feels like a soft transitional record, but they nail it on the head with the consistent writing and playing on here. It's such a tighter listening experience than Nimrod, and that's why I set it above Nimrod. I adore this record. I love Mike Durant's bass work. I love Trey Cool's playing on here. It's nothing too flashy, but they know when to kick up the energy on here and make it a just fun album to sit with. You know, while it's not necessarily the punkiest record in some regards, it is with how it writes itself. And that's where I feel like the strengths of this record lie. It's more consistent than Nimrod, with better writing that shows them aiming in different conceptual atmospheres, and that's important. And I feel like that's what makes it one of the more poignant pieces of Green Day's discography. I don't feel like this is a good starting record for anybody, but if you enjoy American Idiot and you want to see them toying with some more socially conscious writing, not that they didn't dip on that in Dookie and Insomniac, but this feels a lot more outward, and I enjoy that about it. I feel like if you like American Idiot, you'll like Warning for different reasons. If you've never given Warning a chance, because it's a record that people are kind of iffy on in Green Day's catalog, I feel like it is worth your time. The fusions of acoustic and electric work really, really well. The band is in top form performance-wise, and some of my favorite Green Day songs are on this record, like Minority and the title track, and I feel like it's really worth your time as a whole.
In mine, on my own, here we go.
I fucking love Insomniac. I think it's an incredible Green Day record. It's an incredible pop punk record. It's arguably one of my favorites, at least of the 90s. I think that it's edgier, it's got some harder sounds than what's on Dookie, and I appreciate that. Well, obviously, I like Dookie more. I like that this doubled down on Dookie's ideas. This is the perfect way to write a companion record. You know, you take some of the snotty attitude that was from your past release and you ramp it up on tracks like Brat and Geek Stink Breath and Jaded. You add in some new ideas like Walking Contradiction, and you throw in a whole bunch of other punk ideas and you tie it together in a bow that fits the album incredibly well. As a guy with insomnia, Brain Stew hits with me a lot. I mean, I'm recording this at 2 in the morning, if that tells you anything, and it's not abnormal for me to make videos at this time of the day. I really like the sounds on this record. I like that they take jabs at things, like on Babs of Uvulahu. You know, I like that they don't just keep it personal in their own insular way. They take jabs at other aspects of the world in a way that I feel like is different than what Dookie was aiming for, and I appreciate that a lot. And I adore this record. I think it's very, very good, and I think it's well worth your time. I don't think it's a good starting point. I feel like it's a great companion piece to Dookie. I feel like immediately after Dookie, you need to throw on Insomniac, because they go together like cereal and milk. You know, it's a beautiful marriage of two records that work very, very well. I've thought about doing a series talking about companion records by artists or just in general, and this is a great idea of that, of listening to two albums that go so well together. It's damn near perfect. Now I, like my buddy John, love this record. It is a very important record to me and a lot of contemporary pop punk, but I think that it does a lot for Green Day's career as well, because I feel like it did in the 2000s for them what Dookie did for them in the 90s. It set a precedent for the sound, and in American Idiot's case, shifted their sound in a more compelling direction. It you know, took some of the socio-political ideas on Warning and flourished them out into this grand opera. And in this section, I'm going to compare it a little bit to 21st Century Breakdown, if only because it's kind of a companion record. It's kind of hard not to talk about both in hindsight together. But I feel like I said with 21st Century Breakdown, my issue with it being plastered with all of its accompaniment, while there's a little bit of it on here with Extraordinary Girl, it's not the focal point. The focal point is this band of guys just writing a big-ass opera full of thematics and characters and narrative writing, and it's done in a masterful way while also being socio-political and emotional in a personal way at the same time. It accomplishes a lot of shit in just a 57-minute runtime. I love the two epics that are on this record of Jesus of Suburbia and Homecoming. I think that they epitomize the scope of the record in the best way. You know, the build-up on Tales of Another Broken Home, or on some of the big crescendos of Homecoming, just help really show that this band has some gusto to them in a way they never did before. When this album came out, like I said back in the day, I was obsessed with it. I love this record so much, and it's like Jagged Little Pill and some of the other records I've talked about already. Just a nice dose of nostalgia for me whenever I listen to it. I used to listen to it every single night on a mixed CD that had it and a handful of other Green Day's hits on it. And I love what this record did for the band. I love that it showed that they could spread their wings in a profound way. I love that it still has the edginess on tracks like American Idiot or Holiday or St. Jimmy, but not in a way that's necessarily detracting from the overall concepts of the record. I love that they get emotional, like on Wake Me Up When September Ends or Boulevard of Broken Dreams. There's just a lot of dynamics on this record that I feel like showcase a much more mature band in the best way. And I feel like it's also an important record because not only did it help kind of get, a lot of people into this band, it reignited their career, I felt like it opened the door for other bands because while pop punk wasn't necessarily dead in the 2000s, it was still retaining that snotty attitude. Bands like Blink-182 and Sum 41. And while there were bands on the horizon like Panic at the Disco's first album or Fall Out Boy or My Chemical Romance, I felt like this helped sort of them usher into their sound and help create a new tone for pop punk because after this, we had albums like The Black Parade or The Used were coming in with some use of string work and stuff, and I feel like it helped modernize that sound in pop punk in a very good way. And I'm not saying Green Day was the only band to do it, but I feel like they were the band that made the biggest splash and may have had the biggest resonance to show this could be very successful. I feel like an album like this almost kind of maybe helped inspire a band like My Chem to write an album like The Black Parade. Maybe I'm just pulling at straws, but that's just something that as a fly on the wall of observing scenes, I feel like you could make that argument. But as it stands, I still think this album is very, very good, and I feel like it is a record that is memorable across the board. It's a contemporary classic in my opinion.
I'll sit around and watch the tube.
But I still like Dookie more for a lot of the same reasons that I like American Idiot. This is a seminal record for me personally. You know how, and I'm referencing him again just because he's a huge Green Day fan and he's a point of reference when I talk about Green Day because he and I have talked about Green Day a lot relatively, but what American Idiot did for John, Dookie did for me. Like I said, I grew up listening to like The Offspring and Weezer and stuff, but I also listened to a lot of Dookie, and it's an album that I get very nostalgic for, more so than a lot of other records from my youth. I just love the sound of this record. I love the snotty nature of it. I love the sounds of the guitars. I love Trey's drumming. The bass work on here, I would argue, is some of Mike Dirnt's best bass work. Longview, When I Come Around, She's bass line, all so good, and they're produced so very well. The production on here is fucking crisp, as it is on American Idiot, because the same motherfucker produced it, but the production on these two records are classic in sound. The band is just firing on another level. They took Kerplunk and they nourished it and they flourished it out into the snotty, ratty, punky kid that just sits at home and jerks off on his couch and smokes weed all day. And while that seems like a really underwhelming protagonist coming off of American Idiot, I like the sound of the record a fuck ton. I like the very sort of fed up with the world already as a disenfranchised youth of burnout. I like the build-up that a lot of these songs have, like Welcome to Paradise or Basket Case. I love When I Come Around's sort of laid-back attitude. It's got a laid-back sound to it that I just enjoy a lot more. This is pop punk that I feel like is just top tier. Some of the golden gooses of pop punk. The hooks are catchy, the songwriting isn't too out there, and it's just a quality fucking classic that I feel like is well worth your time. And yeah, it's my favorite Green Day record personally, and one that I feel like is a great starting point, if not American Idiot. Both of these records, phenomenal starting points. This was my starting point, though, Dookie, and it's one that's lingered with me throughout my life so far. And that's going to bring us to the end of another Reformatted Discography review. Did you like it? If you did, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. And let me know what you thought of this review in the comments down below. Special thanks to my patrons. If you would like to join their ranks, get early access to content, get exclusive content like the Patreon cut of this review, that's been up for a couple of months now, or access to any of the Reformatted Discography reviews before they go live, it is linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Vowel Rag. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.